All right. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody for attending today, and thank you for joining us for this panel discussion with some three experts on from product knowledge to partner revenue lessons from the field. Now, we're talking about this topic today because pretty much every company on earth who has a product offers some sort of product training, whether it be videos or actual extensive courses that they've developed and training paths and certifications and things like that. But very few companies are actually good at it. And so we're going to be talking about how to really make that training good so you can really engage channel partners and the salespeople who are selling for you and your channel partners, organizations. And then we're also going to talk about incentives, how to incentivize and gamify those channel partners. And then also really how to do great training that really kind of moves the needle. And that's what this is all about today, is how do we make our channel partner training, our product training actually change business metrics. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce our three experts that we have today. All three of them have been in this industry for a long time, and they all have experience in three distinct areas. One is Brett Strauss, who is an expert at learning technology that actually manages and drives channel partner training. NetExam is a company, NetExam LMS Plus is the product that they offer. And then second is Jeff Campbell. He is actually more of an expert in incentivizing and gamifying training so that you get more participation, you get more product knowledge in the minds of your channel partners, and they actually sell more. And then last is Dan Montgomery, who is a longtime expert, veteran of the partner training industry, and actually now has an organization that focuses on improving learning and development content and training programs. And his company is Montara Consulting. And of course, Jeff's is Incently. So we'll get started now with those questions. And what I'd like to do is the first question I would actually like to ask of Brett Strauss. So let's get started with that first question. So, Brett, what are the key metrics that matter when evaluating channel partner training performance?
Hmm. Well, there's a number of different levels you need to look at the micro and the macro level. At the micro level, you want to look at the individuals and are they completing your training? How well are they doing? Are they just passing? Are they getting 100%? Are they going through your training and meeting the goals and that you've set out? And then one level up from that is the actual partner organization, the company. So you might have a partner that has 15 salespeople in it, and you want to look overall, are those 15 salespeople meeting the goals that you set? Maybe you require or are looking for a 20% completion rate of sales training for their people. So you would expect 3 of them to be completing training. And then at the highest level, you really have what effect is the training having on their real world sales goals. And that's really how you measure success. It's not just did they get 100 on the exam or did they complete all the training. They might do all those things and their sales might not be affected whatsoever, which means you really probably have a problem with your training. You need to go back in and change that to make it more adaptable for the end user to actually move the ticker when it comes to increasing sales. So you have to go outside of the LMS into the PRM, looking at the actual sales numbers of those groups and be able to say there's a connection that when organizations we're working with meet our training goals, meet or exceed the training goals, we see an uptick in sales. And quite honestly, you should be able to measure it down to the 100th percentile and share that information back. In successful organizations, they can go into the channel partner group and say, look, if you complete this course, you should expect a 4.3% increase in sales overall because we've measured it. We've done a before and after comparison, and we've seen that there is an uptick in sales. And by doing that, by promoting that to the partners, I think there's more of an incentive for them to go in and want to do the training because they know, okay, this isn't just fluff that you're requiring me to go through. There's an actual connection between success and the information that you're giving me. And so being able to go and say, look, you should expect this kind of increase in sales if you complete this course we think will help incentivize them to want to take the training because they know there's a direct connection. You always have to be analyzing the quality of your training. And the only way to really do that is to make sure that you are measuring the success of before and after the people that are going through that training. And Dan, we worked together when you were at Oracle. I mean, how were you guys on that large scale? I mean, you had over 100,000 people going through training. How were you guys looking to measure that?
Yeah, and I think Brett, starting out with just a measurement strategy, I think too often people jump into a solution and they don't think about the end-to-end process and looking for what they want to measure in the outcomes. And that's just not, the day-to-day metrics, but how those metrics link into the sales productivity and what we're expecting from a quota standpoint. And we had a dedicated team of analysts in the training organization. What was the beauty of the net exam system was the access to that data and the ability to use that information across our platforms so that we could really look at the correlations and understand what was working and what we could improve, but also how we could communicate that to our channel partners, to your point, and let them know what the value of that training was. But then also pivot as a training organization if we saw that there was content or training that wasn't having the impact that we needed to, that we could make that adjustment and work with our partners to get that feedback and make those adjustments in real time. And I think that's really where when you can see the outcome, right, when you can show that measurement and the data that shows things are working the way they're supposed to. Not only does it give the confidence to your partner, but internally, when you have a sales organization who's relying on that additional revenue and leadership who's looking for that, you can show the value of the system and the value of the training.
Yeah, not only that, they're fighting for budget dollars, and they can
Exactly.
justify those dollars by saying, look, this is the effect it's having, and they can go back and ask for more.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I'll piggyback onto what Brett just said, and what we find in the organizations we work with is that those training metrics are really those leading indicators, and the metrics that you are looking at them come from the lens of training success, whereas the lagging indicators are really those sales metrics and the revenue generated from that. And that's where we see the conversation is easier to bring to senior leadership when you can make the connection between those leading and lagging indicators. And then I hate to say justify the ROI, because if you're doing it right, then the revenue is there. But I think that's the big piece of connecting the two sides of that data from the training metrics to the revenue metrics. And once you've got that, uh, yeah, you certainly identify the problems that you might be encountering, but then also it's also the justification to put the gas pedal down and expand the program further.
Yeah, I think that looking at the grades of the students and looking at the number of partners that have completed the training is a great analysis of the commitment of the partners. When you look at the revenue, that's an analysis of the quality of the training. So you could be getting 100% completions across the board, but if your dollars aren't increasing, then you have a problem with your content. It's not achieving the goals you need to achieve. So you're really kind of measuring two different things when you're analyzing those numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let's move on to the next question, which is about getting those channel partners to participate more and to take the training so that they know how to sell the products better. So I'll direct this question first to Jeff. So Jeff, why do some channel training programs struggle with adoption and success, and how do incentives help solve that problem?
Yeah, we get pulled into those types of situations because a lot of these programs lack generally a marketing strategy or an actual effective marketing strategy. And those programs suffer just from low visibility or awareness or perceived value from the partner side. The partners are asking, what's in it for me? It's maybe unclear that what they're going to get out of it or benefit from it. The other part is the training is not mandatory. You cannot force your partners to take it. You're competing for their attention and time. And then internally within the organization that's looking to offer it is usually it's the strategy is left to the training department, and it's not a collaborative or comprehensive overall company strategy. And we find the best projects are the ones where you have that collaboration and senior leadership support in multiple different departments that are behind that push. And that's really why most companies see training as a cost center, where we look at it as a growth lever. And it really comes down to a strategic reframe, because it's not really just about training, it's about mind share. And if you think about your partners, if they're not thinking about your products and your brand, then they're selling somebody else's. And so we come in and look at how do we incentivize these partners, not just from a training tool perspective, but from a overall marketing strategy across the entire company. And we think of it kind of from three major pillars. And one is customer acquisition, like how do we get more customer eyeballs on our content and thinking about our brand? How do we get them to consume our content? So we have a content consumption or engagement pillar, and then really taking these partners and turning them into brand champions. So how do we drive that advocacy to then fuel more acquisition and grow the program and company further? All of that boils down to revenue growth, because if we do all those things well, then ultimately we see that result in increased revenue. So kind of digging into each one of those, when we look at that acquisition part, we look at incentivizing all the behaviors that lead people down the path towards, what Brett was talking about, really those metrics. So just rewarding people for signing up. So and referring people, growing that audience of your partners within your learning in your learning environment. And we give the sales reps of the companies a positive message to go to their channel partners with, and saying like, hey, we're incentivizing our training. You should come and take these courses because this is what your benefits are. So we get that feedback that it's a feel good message for the sales reps to go to and approach their partners with. And then that really just fuels that expansion into new partner networks, new countries, new geographies. It allows that sales reps to have that feel good marketing message to expand with. The next pillar on engagement, that content consumption, we introduce virtual currency into the LMS, and we award that for all of the actions that people take that we know will drive value for the organization. So signing up, completing courses or programs, and all of those coins are tied to their actual exchangeable value to get the incentives. But it also then pushes people to do different levels, and so we know quite easily who are our top consumers of our content and taking the actions that we want versus who are the laggers, and then we can then differentiate our marketing messages to those different groups. And then the last part we actually really are big on is the incentivizing the advocacy piece. So we reward the partners for providing testimonials, so images and videos speaking about the training benefits that they've got, and then pushing that to their social media channels and then sending it into the company for them to use in their marketing. And what we're finding is that nothing attracts more customers like a happy customer. So that feedback loop of that advocacy pushing back into that acquisition pillar is really that cycle. And really what we find is that this becomes a competitive advantage for the companies that are deploying this strategy. And that's where they're capturing the mind share of their partners over their competitors. That incentivized training builds, first of all, it garners attention, it builds loyalty, and then it keeps your products top of mind. And we kind of look at it from a more product knowledge disseminated is going to result in more confidence speaking or selling from your partners to their buyers. You get more engagement that leads to stronger brand alignment, and then your advocacy is really what reaches your wider audience and garners that influence. So our statement we get is like mind share equals market share equals revenue. That's really where we come up the incentivized side.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, and I think, Jeff, you have a good point there, because I think about all the times in an organization you have resources competing for different initiatives and time, and how do you make certain that when a seller or an organization comes in and says, hey, I've got to spend time doing something, they're spending time doing it on the things that are going to have the most impact to that channel partner's outcomes and the things you're looking for from a revenue standpoint. And I think getting a manner of approach that allows people to see the benefit, but also, sellers generally are competitive by nature, right? So they like to see where they're at, and then they like to boast about that. So I think the approach that you're talking about really hits home with how organizations that I've been working with are looking for getting people to devote that time, right? When I come in for my day and I'm looking through my to-do things and I have that open, 20, 30, 40 minutes, how am I going to invest that time in a way that makes me feel good about where I want to be and where I want to go? And then that, spreads across the organization, and then getting that feedback into a system where you can use that to show that, these are outcomes that people are seeing. It's their voice that's telling. I think that creates a much more engaging and a much more impactful environment for people to learn.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the other part I would add to that is, again, kind of back to the metrics conversation as well, is we are looking at now associating what are the dollars of revenue per customer generated per year and per course completion. So if we can tie together what is the actual content dissemination value to each customer over a year and then even longer, then we start to look at, well, what's the value of this acquisition strategy? And then from there, once we get someone into our LMS, it's really top of funnel marketing. We now know who they are, we know what they do, what content they consume, and from there we can then look at, well, how long can we keep them affiliated with our training program, and then we can start to put a dollar value on what is the actual impact that this person is making for our organization. But the feedback we get is the incentives drive the revenue. Our largest manufacturing company started with 300 partner training, I should say 300 partners in the United States, and now are at over 50,000 in over 20 countries. And they've added tens of millions of dollars of revenue through this expansion strategy that I've just mentioned. So we've seen the impact in real expansion of number of customers, but also in the revenue side.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Okay. So moving on to our next question, we often say content is king, but what makes content truly engaging for channel partners? And Dan, maybe if you can answer that one for us.
Yeah, and this is one that comes a lot in organizations. I think organizations make a lot of investment in their learning and development and training content organizations, and they really want to know what drives that success. And I think that when in the time that I've managed content and connecting that to overall strategy, I think it starts with that approach of leadership really getting on the same page and creating that strategy around what they want to accomplish with content. Because I think there often is a big disconnect in leaders thinking that building content is easy, right? They associate it with, I can throw PowerPoint slides together, I can take product spec sheets and, jazz it up and throw it out there and call it self-paced training. And at the end of the day, those are the things that really give learning organizations a bad reputation. So I think there are, four things that I really look for in good content: interactivity and engagement. So how does the organization leverage polls and interactivity and quizzes and use that data to measure, training and training outcomes? Gamification, as Jeff has talked about, I think is key. I think more organizations are starting to understand the benefit of having points associated with learning outcomes and measuring that through leaderboards and those other vehicles. I also think that having diverse content formats, I think, video is becoming really big in organizations. There's a lot of AI tools that allow you to create video quickly and easily. I think younger generations of learners are gravitating towards that type of media for learning, but you also have to make sure there's good data and infographics and other interactivities associated with the content, in creating that diversification. I think the other thing that we hear a lot of is, training can be too long, right? So how do you create micro learning? How do you understand how to chunk learning objectives in a way that a learner can consume it based on their competency and skill levels, so it becomes relevant to them? And so having that, that diversification in the format, I think, is key. The third thing I really look for is accessibility and convenience. I think too often organizations make it difficult to get to learning content, right? So having systems in place, companies talk about learning in the flow of work. I think that's a real thing. I think companies are starting to figure that out, but having the right learning system in place so that when I need access to training or information, I can do that relatively easily and not have to, search through, different folders and files and, all the different repositories in an organization where things end up, that make it, difficult to, consume um, content. So that accessibility is key. But I think the last thing and probably most important is feedback mechanisms, right? So across, content, making sure, content can be rated and evaluated as it's being completed, making sure that there's data available on not only the outcomes and completions, but what types of questions and polls and quizzes are being challenged, are people having issues with, are getting, is a question always being completed correctly? So there's information there that tells us that maybe that's not the right question, but really using that data and that feedback mechanism to make sure the content is having the impact that the organization is expecting, and being able to measure that in a way that not only the learner can see what their progress and their outcomes are, but at different levels of the organizations and the channel partners can see how relevant that information is, and associating that back to the outcomes that are expected, that have been outlined in that strategy, to say, we want these metrics to increase. We put this training in place. When we do these things and make these completions, we see these outcomes.
Yeah, you're seeing a move toward more of a headless LMS environment where training is being consumed just in the process of your day-to-day job. And one thing we rolled out about a year and a half ago was embedded training for SaaS applications. So you can be on a page and see a little icon with a little book on it, and you click on it and it'll throw up a little 30-second video, just not on how to do the whole product or even how to do the whole page, but how to complete the function in just that small area you're working in. And it answers that question for you, and you get credit for consuming it through SSO. It shuts down, and then you go back to using the application. So trying to get the training into the user's hands at the point at which they're using your product is a great way of doing that. But micro learning is key. I mean, we've really turned into an ADD in economy where people have gotten used to TikTok. They've gotten used to 15 to 20-second videos and consuming that information and moving on, which even I think is so much better than, death by PowerPoint. Some 3-hour PowerPoint slide class is just, that's miserable. I mean, you don't want to put your people through that, and it's not a great way to train. There's so many new ways of doing that, and especially with the advent of AI, and what we're seeing is you have the ability now to just carry on conversations with an avatar, just like the video you're looking at now, and having a back and forth a confirmation and realization that you're not just memorizing numbers and facts from slides and then spitting those back out to your customers. You're actually engaging in a conversation. You're listening. You're asking the right questions. And that has a huge effect on sales at the end of the day, because you can always just hand a PDF to somebody with all the facts and figures about your products. But being able to listen to their problems and the issues they're having, and being able to come up with a helpful solution using their language is really key to selling, I think, in this day and age.
Yeah, and I
Dan,
think that goes back.
sorry, go ahead there, Dan.
Yeah, Jeff, I was just gonna say, I think, Brett, that goes back to the whole, how do you create the right value proposition? What's the strategy for your channel partners, and really not just creating training based on benefits of a product, but it's, services, features, how that is can be sold, right? Having use cases and examples, and being able to provide a coach on call, right? So that if a particular product or service issue needs to be studied or learned, there's a way to get access to those short videos in a way that helps me in that issue that's relevant to that problem that I'm having at that point in time.
Yeah, and your partners are not just selling your products; they're selling all your competitors' products,
Right.
and all your competitors are trying to get all those people trained as well. So there's a real battle for the mind share out there of these people, and you cannot give them hours and hours of courseware and expect them to take time away from selling every day to meet your needs. You have to get in, you have to be efficient, you have to get the information over as quickly as possible and hopefully help make them more successful at their jobs. And you just can't take advantage of that relationship.
Dan, Brad, I'm curious on the content side as well. Most of the companies, I think, come into the channel partner training with the mindset of offering their own product training as the content source of their program. But I'm seeing now with some of the other companies that I work with that there's a bit of a mind shift is providing that industry professional knowledge training so that they're establishing themselves as the authority in the space. And then, of course, their product training is available in the same, I'm going to say the same space. Is that something that you're seeing as well, or could you speak to like, maybe even in your past, like what have you seen work well in that in terms of the content that they're providing?
Well, you can provide all the information about your products you want to the salespeople, but if they are not particularly good salespeople, then it's irrelevant, right? They're just going to spit those numbers
Yeah,
back. So I am seeing is a move where companies and manufacturers are investing in providing training, general sales training
yeah,
to these people. Like, how do you how do you ask for a contract? How do you ask questions about what their issues are? People are willing to, some companies are willing to invest in helping making these people better salespeople, period,
yeah,
regardless of the products they're selling. And I think that's critical because I think there's a lot of people out there that are in sales that, took a job, they wanted it, but they might not be gifted salespeople. Not everybody has that gift. So stepping back and trying to help mold them into better general salespeople,
yeah,
you can benefit from that dramatically, right? Because the more they're selling, the more
yeah,
commissions they're making, the more money you're making. So
yeah,
I think it's a really wise investment to try and help offer just basic
yeah,
general sales help to some of these folks.
Yeah, I agree, Brett. And I think that's where, again, when you look at any organization, they have a ton of content, right? They have, marketing departments, they have product development, they have app dev, they have, customer support, client experience, all these organizations that are capturing, processes and procedures and documentation and having a strategy that pulls all of that together, right? In the right type of content management system knowledge base so that it's accessible. But then to your point, Brett, it's not just about all of that information on how to do things or how things are put together or the flow of an application or that, but it is how do I sell that, right? So how do I build a package, a learning path, content that takes the what and the how and combines it in a way that I can consume it and practice that, right? And then get feedback on that approach so that I know whether or not I'm making progress in my ability to use the information that's available in the organization in a practical manner that allows me to be successful. And I think that's the pivot organizations are making. To your point, Brett, is they're realizing that the soft competencies, the technical knowledge and the process knowledge is easy to get in an organization, but putting that in a way that someone can use it in a competency model that allows them to sell or close or negotiate is really where organizations are making that pivot.
It's also a litmus test because if you put that training out there and no one consumes it, that tells you something about your partners. But the ones that take the time to actually go out there and make that effort, they're identifying themselves as somebody that wants to improve their business. And you should be able to treat them, I think, as a better partner that way.
we'd like to thank everybody for attending today, and a special thank you to our panel of Brett Strauss from NetExam, Jeff Campbell from Incently, and also Dan Montgomery from Mentara Consulting. Really appreciate their expertise and sharing it with the group today. I also wanted to let everybody know that we did record this presentation, and so it will be available on YouTube and also distributed through LinkedIn. So you can have full access to that and be able to share it with anybody you'd like to. And we'd like to thank you for attending and want to make sure you all have a great day today.